I'm just a boy from Kansas out to save the world from chronic disease. And I truly mean that. Nobody is in control of your health but you. I can't heal you. Your doctor can't heal you. You have to heal you. And it's all about having the education and empowerment to know what you need to be changing within yourself, within your life, to set your soul free and accomplish that best life that we all like to talk about. And I truly believe that the greatest medicine of all is to teach people how not to need it. I'm Brendan Vermeyer, the original Holistic Savage. Welcome to the Holistic Savage podcast. Well, awesome. So, Dr. Wilke Cole, thank you so much for joining me on the Holistic Savage podcast. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. I'm really excited to have you on. So, kind of an intro to the Holistic Savage podcast. You know, I'm just a boy from Kansas out to save the world from chronic disease. And I truly believe the greatest medicine of all is teach people how not to need it. And that's where, with the podcast, that's the mission, you know, and it's really a privilege being connected to so many influential experts in the industry, and we're all in alignment with our missions of we're really trying to do some good in the world and get ahead of this chronic disease epidemic. And it's the next wave of healthcare. And as you know, your business line with the next generation of natural healthcare and the future of natural healthcare, that's where everything's going. So, you know, I'm really honored to have you on today and talk about everything that you're doing in your world to contribute to what is our aligned, you know, greater mission. So tell us a little bit about what you're up to right now. I know you just released a book.
Yeah, man. Yeah, first of all, I think that your mission is so powerful. It's so much needed. You know, we can look at the world around us and see like there's such a vast need for people. You know, a vast need for answers, a vast need for people to be listened to, and a vast need for people to get healthy. So for sure. Yeah. I mean, my day job is functional medicine, right? I consult people around the world via our virtual clinic. And that's my like 9 to 6 p.m. Grind of love, of really giving people a lot of time and thoughtfulness to what they're going through. But somehow, and the off hours, I write books and speak about it too. So this is my second book is The Inflammation Spectrum. My first book was Ketotarian, which is a mostly plant-based ketogenic book. And my follow-up is a deep dive into this concept that I touched upon in Ketotarian, this concept of the inflammation spectrum, where as a functional medicine practitioner, I see this every hour, is various degrees or manifestations or just different components of inflammation in people's lives. So it's a deep dive into this concept, kind of a functional medicine perspective on this, and tools to overcome it and improve their wellness. So I'm really excited for people to check it out. And it's been a labor of love for sure, because it's hard to encapsulate like all the clinical stuff in a book form, right? There's so many variabilities, but we did a great job with it. And it starts with this quiz where people can find out where they're at on the inflammation spectrum. And the quiz is what took me, one of the hardest parts of the book was the quiz, because it's adapting things that I talk to patients about during a consultation, but to make it make sense to the layperson in a book form was the tough part. So we mastered it, we got it down, and I'm excited for people to check out the book.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's really powerful. You know, you and I live a very similar life, and that's where like the podcast or our free Holistic Savage Challenge, or, you know, when I'm not with clients, apparently I'm creating a course. And what I love about what you're doing with the book, you know, there's kind of the two sides of our world and in our business models, where there's, okay, we have to teach the next generation of practitioners, right? You know, we have to be teaching that next generation, because the practitioners, the clinicians, the doctors, the health coaches, you know, they're the ones on the front lines. You know, they're in the trenches with the clients. And I always like to think of it as like, you know, we are partners in self-healing. You know, something I'm really adamant on is like, nobody can heal you for you. You have to heal yourself.
Mhm.
It's a matter of having that practitioner, that health coach, that team of professionals,
Mhm.
those support resources to
Mhm.
help guide you along that path so you can achieve self-actualization. And so with that, it's like, okay, well, we have to be doing the lecturing and the courses and all of that to teach that next generation of practitioners because, I was just looking at some market research, and by 2025, 75% of the workforce is going to be the millennial generation.
Mhm.
And times are changing. And with the functional medicine space, it's kind of this cocktail of all sorts of different backgrounds, conventional medical and naturopathic physicians, chiropractors, health coaches. And so we have yet to really define what is that next generation practitioner. But
Mhm.
meanwhile, then there's the consumer market. And so we have to be able to adapt our teachings and adapt that language and be able to then hand it to the general consumer at a reasonable price point. And so that's
Mhm.
why I have an enormous amount of respect for what you're doing with your book, and I can't wait to read it because it is hard to adapt that language in a way that
Mhm.
you can directly empower the patient, the consumer, the general public.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you highlighted what my logically what I was thinking about. I never verbalized it like that. But you're right. I think that there are people that maybe are not ready for a functional medicine practitioner, or they don't need one and they just want it. And there's so much you can do to take agency on your health on, for yourself as just the person that's listening to this podcast, or that's reading a book, that they could start leading into wellness in the way that makes sense. And a heart of functional medicine is we're all different. It's bio individuality, and that's another variable or variables that I was quite took a lot of effort to make it make sense in a book, for people to be able to customize their own health and wellness based off of a quiz results, which
Hmm.
again is adapted from health history and the questions I ask patients. So to give them specific toolboxes based on those results. So it was definitely a lot of fun at the same time. And I think to your point is that mostly how I'm consulting patients are one on one, but my mind has been really thinking about it for the past year of how do I continue to make functional medicine more accessible, more
Hmm.
affordable, and democratize what we're doing here. And way that we're doing it is in addition to the one-on-one consults, which we're still doing, but once a month we're doing these online group classes, which
Hmm.
enables us to, we can talk to 100 people
Hmm.
at once versus consulting each of those 100 people separately. So that I'm really excited about that, because I think this is like all of these ideas that you and I are thinking about and other great people are thinking about too, is how to expand the reach to help more people, because it's A, so much needed, and B, it is something that we all have a heart to help people. And
Hmm.
when you see these certain impasses of, they can't afford the cost of the labs or whatever the cost may be, whatever the problem may be, how can we find ways to cut costs to make it more accessible and affordable to more people around the world? So I love the ideas that are coming out of this space,
Hmm.
because we're really trying to democratize this amazing field of healthcare.
Absolutely. And it is a lot of fun. It very much is kind of this strong entrepreneurial space as well. And I really see it as a lot of different thought leaders of how can we make this more mainstream? How can we reach more people? And like even in my course, that's something like I've taken a ton of courses, but nobody's ever taught me how to be a good consumer as a practitioner of like we
Mhm.
are making the decision of like how we spend our clients' money, on what lab
Mhm.
tests and what supplements. So in a way, we put our professional reputation on the line that's dependent on this third party business that, we
Mhm.
have nothing to do with. And so there needs to be that intelligence. And the biggest barrier, it kind of feels right now like functional medicine is a bit of a luxury service. A lot of it's out of pocket. And people are paying immense amounts, and then of course too a lot of these practitioners like, well, they didn't get into functional medicine to build a business and do business stuff. They did it because they're empaths that love serving others. And, but that's where people like us, we have to kind of, okay, well, I'll personally, I'll never give up one-on-one consulting with our virtual practice, because it's just, there's nothing more amazing than having that direct impact on that person,
Mm-hmm.
sitting across from you. But nonetheless, if all we're ever doing is just kind of servicing that next person in line, well, hey, millions upon millions of people need us. So how can we, scale it and systematize and again, make
Mm-hmm.
this information? Because ultimately what it is we have to educate and empower people. And
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what you're doing. So
Yeah.
with this book, can't wait to read it. Give us a little synopsis on, kind
Yeah.
of how you break it down and how this book progresses.
Yeah. So the book starts off with educating people on the inflammation spectrum and how the way that I understand. I mean, it's a concept that I made up, but basically, the way that I see it in my clinic are 7 main sections on the inflammation spectrum, and it's gut, brain, hormones, blood sugar, detoxification, musculoskeletal, and then we talk about the 8th section is polyinflammation, the interconnectedness of the different spokes on that spectrum. So I wanted to inform people the far-reaching implications of chronic inflammation and how people may think of inflammation. The layperson may think, okay, well, if I have tight muscles or joints, if I have like soreness, that's inflammation. Well, that's true, but it's so much more than that. I mean, you talk about hormonal receptor sites and the blunting of the receptor sites and the vast, rise of different hormonal problems and hormonal resistance problems, insulin resistance being one of them, but other resistance patterns, to brain issues. When you talk about anxiety and depression and brain fog and the research around inflammation and the cytokine model of cognitive function, and basically how inflammation impacts our brain function. And people like to separate mental health from physical health, but mental health is physical health.
Mm-hmm.
So really kind of informing people on that level, and so on and so forth. These things that to the average person that's maybe going through these issues, they're not realizing inflammation's implication into why they feel the way that they do or why they're going through this certain health issue. And it's not static. It's a continuum. It's
Mm-hmm.
from mild symptoms like mild background anxiety, mild fatigue, mild digestive issues, and so on and so forth, to all the way on the other end of that inflammation spectrum where it's full-blown panic attacks or autoimmune conditions or diabetes or over any other ICD-10 code you can think of, and then everything in between on that inflammation spectrum. So that's important for people to realize, because we have to know what we're up against to do something about it. And many times people settle for just feeling lousy because they think it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
They think, well, I'm just getting older, or they look at everybody around them and they see themselves as feeling pretty much the same as everybody else. And they equate ubiquity with normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a good thing when you look at the rise of chronic health problems and medication lists.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because something's common doesn't make it normal. And we have to even raise people's awareness to the fact that, oh, wait, like this is not normal. And these are, from a functional medicine perspective, check engine lights. And we have to look underneath the hood, proverbially speaking, and finding out what's misfiring, what's dysfunctional, that's driving that symptom, whatever that may be. So the book starts off with that conversation of raising people's awareness to their wellness, for them to check in with themselves, to do a little, system analysis, so to speak, to
Mm-hmm.
see where they're at on the inflammation spectrum. And then from there, they have a specific toolbox based on their quiz results and a specific plan it's all adapted on things that I've seen over my years of seeing patients. And yeah, so that's what the book is. But if we talk about the food, we start with food, and we have this conversation of finding out what your body loves and hates. And we're all different, which is another part of functional medicine. I mentioned bioindividuality. It applies to so many things, food
Mm-hmm.
being one of them. So it's really using food as medicine, but tailored to the individual. And then secondly, it is not just about food. So having conversations beyond about other things that can drive inflammation cascades up. So looking at stress and toxins and
Mm-hmm.
other things that can impact inflammatory pathways, because and I know that you know this, but people can be eating like the best, like super food, like healthy meal, but be serving their body a big slice of stress every day, or exposing themselves with toxins, or whatever the case may be. Have an unhealthy relationship with technology that could be impacting their stress or their circadian rhythms and poor sleep. So all this stuff, all of these epigenetic factors, not just food, are constantly and dynamically instructing inflammatory pathways,
Hmm.
which is linked again to all of these health issues that we struggle with as a society. Yeah.
Man, I love that. I'm really digging, the spectrum that you're mapping out here. And I love what you said of confusing ubiquity with normalcy. That was an
Mm.
amazing line. And I love some good verbiage. That was good. And you're so right. In today's world, like, our world has never been more toxic. It's never been more stressful and stimulating and sympathetic driving. And so we really are looking at this epidemic where, the more kind of classic healthcare model, and those that are still kind of stuck in the older paradigm that's kind of dying right now,
Mhm.
is ultimately like this idea of, like, acute disease. And it's like, well, no, what we're looking at now is the end product. All these people that are sick with the end stage autoimmunity and, XYZ, you fill in the name of the diagnosis. That's the end stage of the chronic inflammation. And I would probably believe or argue, like, I don't think our species has ever had so many inflammatory triggers that we've been presented with. That's why, like, with this course, which has kind of been the big project of my year that I'm getting ready to launch, mold microbes methylation. And, that's nerdy for the clinicians and practitioners, but really it's like, okay, well, I have the starting module of, like, well, what drives disease? Oxidative stress and inflammation. Okay, well, what drives oxidative stress and inflammation? It's like, well, let's start with the environment.
Mhm.
Let's start with some psycho-emotional belief. Your body goes where your psychology goes. Then let's look at the lifestyle, and everything
Mhm.
that encompasses the movement, the nutrition, et cetera, et cetera. Because, one thing that I'm really hearing from you, not directly, is, like, I observe in the functional medicine industry, it still sometimes gets a little too, like, okay, run labs and throw supplements at the lab test. And as you are preaching right now, that's not what it is. And so I love how you're creating a
Mhm.
quiz that really is this, subjective data that provides a good reflection of, oh crap, here's kind of my at-risk score. And then
Mhm.
here's the different aspects of my overall lifestyle and environment that I need to start working on. Because you have to lay that foundation and then work your way up to the top, where then you can do that spot cleaning with the supplements or medications or whatever
Mhm.
it is. But if we don't have that solid foundation, then we're just trying to bail water out of a sinking ship.
Yeah, totally. And but most people aren't even fully aware. They're so detached from their body and even understanding like what that is. They know roughly, here's my energy, here's my digestion, but they don't, like, we take for granted, I think, oftentimes being in the health space, that the average person doesn't really think about all these things and doesn't really take inventory of their health
Hmm.
or lack of it. So it's a good place to start with, I think, of just raising awareness on what actually normal, not just common, and like how can you actually optimize your health? Because that's the cool thing about, it's like this. While we see the rise of chronic health problems, the other side of it is we understand more than ever, because of the trickle down effect of research and practical application and just clinical experience, like how to improve people's wellness. And most of these things, they're not immutable. They are things that you can overcome and improve and manage and reverse and heal from.
Hmm.
So while it is sobering to look at the statistics of like the rise of chronic health problems, the other side of that coin is that there's so much that we can do to take action on your health to start feeling better.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, and with that, it's one of those where the lifestyle is kind of going to be, the lifestyle and environment is really that foundation. And so I like how with your teaching here, it's not about oh, like, you just need to do this functional medicine protocol, for 3 months, and then all of
Mhm.
your autoimmunity or whatever that took years to
Mhm.
progress is going to go away. And
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the big things is, all functional medicine practitioners, they really need to be setting the expectation up front, because I think functional medicine is an easy thing to sell. It's a very easy of like, oh, we're going to get to the root cause by running some testing, and we just kind of bloop, we throw a dart at the root cause, and then all of your problems go away.
Yeah.
And it's like, but any real practitioner knows that's not it at all. It's not a protocol, it's a lifestyle. We have to change the lifestyle and the environment. The protocol is just to kind of expedite some key targeted therapeutic interventions.
Yeah.
And that's what you're setting them up for with your book.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, there has to be a transition between protocol and lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that transition has to happen. And if it doesn't happen, you are going to probably just add to your pile of things you've tried and maybe worked for a time. And then what? So that segue between protocol and lifestyle has to happen. And it's cool to see that happen, to see that click in someone's mind. It's not just, oh, because this doctor's telling me to do it. It's them owning it for themselves as seeing like, I have agency over my biochemistry.
Yeah.
And that shift is really cool, because then at that point, it's on autopilot. They feel better, which encourages them to keep going. And they have a rhythm and an intuition that they know what works for their body and what doesn't. So that's actually the last couple chapters of the inflammation spectrum talks about that very same thing that you brought up. It's this transition of owning your life and really realizing what works for your body, what doesn't. Because at that point, it's not punitive, it's not dogmatic, it's not over, generalized, broad sweeping, good advice. It is just like you, as the manager of your body, what you deciding for yourself what's worth it and what's not. You deciding for yourself how you're going to live your life. But people even have to get to the point where they have clarity and discernment to even know what works for their body and what doesn't. But once they get that, then at that point they can make the decision what they want to. But they have to start feeling better. They have to get the information for them to have that decision to make. So it's really important, because at that point we are in many ways as functional medicine practitioners obsolete, but that shows we've done our job. We're obsolete for that person because we got them healthier.
Right.
And maybe they come in twice a year or something like that to get labs tested or to have some accountability and structure, because some people like that. But oftentimes we do our job. It's actually a good thing that patients get to the place of independence and freedom to know what works for their body and just need little checkups here and there.
Exactly. Well, and that's where you're doing exactly this. It's greatest medicine of all is teach people how not to need it. And that's kind of the same thing is we've got to be, it's almost like we have to build the tribe of self-healers. That's kind of its own movement of self-healing these days. And it has to be, because that's the only way forward that I can really see based on, the current landscape that is our crazy existential reality. So, with inflammation, it's so potent to understand that as the key concept, because that is kind of the ultimate driver of all the bad juju. And that is the chronic disease epidemic and the mental health epidemic. I mean, we could easily very quickly spin off into a convo on gut-brain connection for 3 hours, but it's like, well, yeah, I mean, I look at it as like, okay, this mental health epidemic, chronic disease epidemic, and I, being a spiritual dude myself, like I would also throw like a spiritual crisis in there. But ultimately, like that's what we're dealing with, and a lot of it is inflammatory driven. And I don't think people realize, like, we hear inflammation get, that word gets thrown around a lot, but most people really don't have a clue what that means, or how, oh, when I eat this food that is a healthy food, it might be a massive trigger. Or, oh, well, I've got all these gut bugs. I don't know anything about gut bugs, but they're kicking off LPS, causing endotoxemia that's driving my heart disease. Or there's just, or even just like negative thought processes and how we see, things like meditation can lower your inflammatory score. I'm doing some cool work with a laboratory right now that specializes in like a urinary inflammation score. And so it's kind of fun doing like mini research to show if like, meditation has an aspirin-like effect, or curcumin has an aspirin-like effect, or cleaning up the toxicity of your products has an aspirin-like effect, and ultimately it's just, well, an anti-inflammatory effect. And
Mm-hmm.
if we can keep that inflammation in check and know it's in check and keep it in check with our lifestyle and our environmental decisions that we make all day, every day, that is going to be the true path to healing.
Yeah, so true. I mean, all of these epigenetic things that it's amazing. Like I get excited like talking to patients every hour is like a new excitement for me. Is like informing people on that information, because it's, you see that light bulb come on, so to speak, where people are like, wow, I didn't realize that I could, meditation did that for me. I didn't realize that the foods I ate could do that for me. It's really cool. So I don't ever take that for granted. And it's hard. I don't know how you could take it for granted fully, because when you're talking to somebody that's going through a real health problem, or you see on social media someone read a book that you wrote, and just the impact that could have on somebody's life,
Mm-hmm.
it's like every time you see that, it's that you remembrance of the gravity of which the word that you speak.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Man, this is fun. So, with inflammation, so for those that listen to this podcast, I'd love to hear, what in the mind of Dr. Will, what are some of the top drivers of inflammation? Would you say, if we're getting specific?
Yeah. So I mean, you have to start with food, and that's too general. So I'll give you specifics. But the foods that we eat are a major player, and I think it's important to start there. But the conversation that we're having in the inflammation spectrum is it's not just about food too.
Mm-hmm.
But starting with food, my I really wanted to keep an open mind and keep my bias out of it as much as I could, on like what works for me may not be right for the reader, or what works for a lot of my patients may not be right for the reader. So we look at the foods that are most likely to cause problems, but without making a full indictment of them, because I want the person to actually bring it back in. So using a tailored functional medicine and like elimination diet approach for them to test for themselves, like really see how does this impact your energy or your digestion, or whatever thing you're trying to improve upon. Does this food make a difference? And if it does, how much of a difference does it make? And then when you have it, is it worth it for you to have it? Because we both know there are certain things that people can eat in small amounts occasionally, and it's going to be worth it for them. They enjoy eating it, and they know if they have too much, it'll be problematic, but they can get away with it every once in a while. And that's a personal decision that, again, I want people to make, and want people to take responsibility for their life,
Mm-hmm.
instead of it being just a diet or a plan or a protocol for them to do, but to really just have that information for themselves about their body. So the things we talk about are going to be grains, and we have a conversation about the hybridization of the grains and the genetic modification of certain grains and the glyphosate spraying on certain grains. It's not just about demonizing grains, but also having a conversation about what we've done to the grain supply and maybe why this could be.
Mm-hmm.
And then we look at dairy, same thing, the crossbreeding of cows and the casein beta A1 versus beta A2, and like the history of that, and what's the better types of dairy if you're going to have it. And then we talk about sugar and all its, it's different euphemisms for sugar, even like the nice sounding healthier ones, like
Mm-hmm.
that make it seem less sugary, and oils that are high in omega-6,
Mm-hmm.
like polyunsaturated fats, like the canola oil, the industrial seed oil. Those would be what I call in the book core four, the core
Okay.
four. And we have four more above that for more of the advanced track, like people that scored higher on the inflammation spectrum quiz. They want to go beyond that. And there we talk about nightshades, legumes, nuts and seeds, and eggs as well. And we talk about the different forms of each one of these, how to prepare them to make them less inflammatory. But out of those 8, and I call those eliminate, but instead of the ATE, it's the number 8. If you need a play on words, guys, I'm your guy. I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm like, oh man, that's a good way of putting that.
Yeah.
But we know that out of those 8 foods, or the 4 foods, however you look at it, that some people tolerate each one of those and some people don't. And then some people tolerate certain kinds of these, but not all people don't.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no hard and fast rule to say that they're all bad.
Right.
So like people like Dr. Gundry, who's brilliant, who's a colleague and friend of mine, he wrote a book about lectins and plant paradox, and it's good stuff. Like I love him. But we both know there's some people that tolerate higher lectin foods just fine. You can't measure it on a lab. They feel fantastic. There's no quantifiable subjective or objective data for to say that that's bad.
Right.
But I know some people that it is problematic for them. So this truth is somewhere in the middle. The truth is bioindividuality. The truth is what's right for your body.
Right.
Because I know that there are certain people with gut issues or different cannabinoid gene SNPs or methylation gene SNPs that we know they have a higher chance of having these food reactivities. So that's the conversation that I have in the book, is finding out what works for you and what doesn't, and talking about each one of these foods and how it may be problematic, may not be. And it's for you finding out for yourself and teaching them how to do so for them to discover it for themselves.
That's amazing, the way that you break it down and kind of systematize that to teach them how to do that, because you're so right. And that's where, it's like with, I'm the director of a big group of practitioners, which is a lot of fun because I'm literally watching and observing and sort of monitoring how hundreds of these practitioners are working with clients. And so I see the common patterns of the shortcomings. And I mean, I love lab testing, don't get me wrong, but all lab testing is a very imperfect snapshot of a moment in time. And it just, there is, with regards to what we're talking about right now with food, there is no food sensitivity test. That's just going to be the perfect, long-term roadmap for your long-term diet. It's going to take, honestly, like I feel like I've got my diet, nutrition, and kind of awareness of biofeedback and listening to my body. I've been living in this body for 27 years. I've gotten pretty good at listening to it, and I've gotten it dialed in. But that's exactly it, is we have to teach these people that intuition of, oh, well, first I have to become self-aware of what I'm feeling and understanding how what I'm doing and the food I'm choosing to eat is evoking this response. Because there's like these different layers. The general public and consumers, okay, well, should I do keto? Should I do Whole30? Should I do paleo? Should I do, all the diet bandwagon? Okay. The next level, which are more like the customers of functional medicine, well, should I be doing low FODMAP, low histamine, low oxalate, salicylate, lectins, or following my food sensitivity test? And it's like, well, yeah, but it's still not even that either, So ultimately, it's like it'd be a lot easier if we could just plug our brains into them. But it doesn't quite work that way. So something I'm curious to ask you about, because in a world where, having started my career as a trainer and nutritionist, that's how I started out when I was 19. And so with that health and fitness background, something I feel strongly about is there's not nearly enough talk about fitness in functional medicine. But at the same time, then you have the rest of the world that is chronically inflamed and chronically unwell. And they think I need to lose weight to get healthy, rather than I need to get healthy and losing weight will be a side effect of that. And so you've got these chronically inflamed people walking into gyms, stirring up more inflammation by doing a rigorous workout program. But then on the other side, it's like, well, in the functional medicine industry, again, like I alluded to before, there's a lot of there still can be a lot of allopathic reductionism to a degree. That's why I have so much respect for what you're doing. Is you know what's up. And so I'm curious your thoughts on like exercise, and like, well, exercise or activity or movement in general can be a very powerful influencer of either driving further inflammation or strengthening our resilience to inflammation as well.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that it's important to, whether you're the person that's going through this or you're the practitioner, or anybody that's kind of having a part of this conversation, is to keep an open mind of what's driving this person's issues. And something that I say all the time, because it's true. It's if I hung my hat on like one way of doing things all day long, I'd be proven wrong all day long. You can't see clients, you can't see patients and reduce it to this simple, medicinal matching game, whether that's pharmaceuticals or, like you said, like this green medicine medicinal matching game where it's like, if they have this, take this supplement. It may be, I mean, obviously I think that generally speaking, these supplements are more effective causing not causing the side effects that the pharmaceuticals are potentially causing, but it's still not the answer. It's so much more than that. And rarely, if ever, I can't even think about it. Can't even think of an example where this were the case, where it was this one thing and this magic bullet supplement came and solved all their problems. It may be a piece of the puzzle, but normally it's a confluence of lots of different factors, a lot of different variables to consider, that you have to deal with all the pieces of the puzzle to really see the sustainable, big time change that this person's looking for, and that as a practitioner you want to see as well. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff. It's multifaceted, it's multi-pronged, but that's where a good, I think, diagnostician comes in to play. That's when it's the dichotomy of functional medicine. It's the science and the art. You have to get the science down, but you have to get the art down too.
Yeah.
And the art's in the space in between the words. The art is the space of just being empathic and being present with this person, because at that point you can get the right information and use your knowledge and wisdom and the science stuff appropriately for that person. Because it's not even just about the data and the science and the labs and all that stuff. It is also just like realizing what that person's even ready for on like a deeper spiritual level, emotional level, because a lot of these people are traumatized
very much
from what they've gone through and things that they've been told or whatever, things from their past, that you need to even have the vessel to give them the information. And if they don't have the vessel to receive it, it's not going to be sustainably changing that person's life. So this is the stuff that that I think about way too often probably, but it's really, I think, important for doctors, practitioners, coaches to start being more mindful of the both sides of that coin.
You're exactly right. And, that's exactly why the pillars of my brand, functional medicine, functional fitness, functional psychology, functional spirituality is, we need all the above. And to me, that is going to be, I don't know, I'm sure I've got a lot of career left in me. I'm young, so I'm just getting warmed up, and I don't know what exactly I'm going to do, but it is like we've got to create that next level professional, that hybrid. Like I'd love to get more, fitness, nutrition, kind of health coach people into the space, pull them in, because some of those people they're young, they're hungry, they're very wicked intelligent. And with the right training, they could really work magic, because we've got to have the professional that can do all of that and practice that art that is the space between, as you said, because like I was talking to Jill Carnahan the other day about mold and all of that, which was fun. And that came up in the conversation where it's like, a lot of these patients and clients, they're horribly traumatized, and that conversation we were talking about, okay, so mold in the home, what do you do? And it's this traumatic experience of remediation, get rid of all your belongings because it's spore contaminated, blah 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 blah. But then what are the traumatic effects of that? Like that induces this fear response in the amygdala that drives sympathetic activity that ultimately is going to contribute to and dysregulate our cytokine signaling. And so then it's like, well, if we have this kind of fear and stressful driven path, it's like we're trying to walk towards healing, but then we choose to take a path that is fear and trauma inducing, which would be literally and metaphorically inflammation promoting.
Yeah,
that's kind of ass backwards.
It is. And it's tough having these conversations about things like mold or things like gut problems or food reactivity. All that stuff's like, we need to educate people, but we need to, at the same time, in equal measure, if not more, layer it in context and layer it in grace and layer it in a way that doesn't create more problems of stress and anxiety. And I think that when we talk about the rise of orthorexia that's going on, I think in part due to the amount of information that people have at their fingertips.
Yeah.
It's a lack of context to a layperson that doesn't have the vessel to receive the information.
Mm-hmm.
And we have content on content and content and all this great information, but it's just too much too soon for somebody to receive it in a way that they're actually going to benefit their life.
Mm-hmm.
And they feel just overwhelmed and just disillusioned as to what the heck they should even be doing. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really important. And that's maybe when a good coach comes in, or a good doctor comes in and starts to disseminate this information and organize this information in a way that's even practical for the person. So it's definitely interwoven throughout the whole book, the inflammation spectrum, because I'm quite aware that this can be overwhelming to some people, of like, what the heck, I need to live in a bubble and I can't eat anything but air and ice cubes.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that's not the message at all. That's actually
Right.
quite the opposite. But it is definitely important, because you need to heal your relationship with yourself. You need to heal the relationship with your body, and
Mm-hmm.
heal your relationship with food. Because a lot of times people, when you look at the rise of autoimmunity, largely impacting women, sadly. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what's the mechanism? We know it is, but it's when the immune system is actually cross-reacting against itself, the body.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, you talk about spiritual. I think that there's spiritual, mental, emotional components to this physical manifestation. What came first, the chicken or the egg here, is probably up to the individual on an individual basis. But many people feel that their body has betrayed them,
Mm-hmm.
and their body has turned against themselves, and in many ways it has,
Mm-hmm.
and that food is their enemy,
Yeah.
because they feel horrible eating certain foods, and they just creates this orthorexia. So it's definitely something that it's at the heart of my practice, the heart of having conversations with people, to start to heal that relationship. Because I feel like that, while we have to heal someone physically, it's also that mending that relationship they have with
Mm.
themselves is important too.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because really my whole career, I've always kind of described like nutrition as a great example of like, well, it's a relationship. You just like everything in life. It's what's your relationship with food, what's your relationship with your exercise, your lifestyle, yourself. And I think the path to self healing is ultimately a path of healing relationships, and it starts with the self. We have to look inwards and uncover our most authentic truths and heal the relationship with ourselves. Because, like with autoimmunity, you're exactly right. In a way, it is kind of a betrayal. But, I almost look at it metaphorically as like, okay, well, because we were born into a world that taught us a certain lifestyle that is very disease promoting, and we were born into an environment that is very disease promoting, which is at the end of the day the fault of our own species. Oh, that sucks. So then we kind of unknowingly have been, the thing is, I think our bodies feel betrayed by us since birth. And it's just, we never knew it, because like we're just born into this world of blank slate. We don't know what we were born into. And all the while we've been betraying our bodies, but then it betrays us in return. It rebels.
Mhm.
And, to me, like on a metaphorical level, that's what autoimmunity really is. And so it's like people kind of get this victim mentality. It's easy to do of like, well, my body's betraying me, and now I'm mad. I'm mad at my body for betraying me, and I'm afraid of my food, and I'm afraid to make every move. And it's like, what's the story that we're telling here? We
Mhm.
need to reframe that story, and that's where hashtag functional psychology. It's like, let's positively reframe this, and like anything that elicits and evokes any kind of either emotional, spiritual, or physiological negative response,
Mhm.
that's a learning opportunity. But we
Yeah.
have to tap into the higher conscious to be able
Mhm.
to look at it as a learning opportunity, rather than the egocentric, well, I'm just mad. And okay, well, that's just steering you further down the inflammation spectrum.
Totally. Yeah. It's something that we say a lot here. It's almost a mantra in our clinic, is you can't heal a body you hate. You can't shame your way or punish your body into wellness. It's just
Hmm.
not going to happen. You'll see blips of success, but ultimately you see the people that are riddled with this negative energy, this sort of triggered pain body that they have in their life, that it is an uphill battle. And it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. And when you're going through real health problems, it's really hard
Yeah.
To find stillness and clarity amidst the noise of going through real health issues.
Totally.
But it is a realization that people have to find for themselves. And it can be a catalyst, a major catalyst for healing in people's lives for many people.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I love what you said there of kind of your mantra in the clinic,
Mhm.
because you're so right. And I was talking to one of my friends, Dr. Adam Miller, who cool guy. I don't know. He's kind of more like off the grid, but he's an amazing human that I'd love to
Yeah.
get connected more. But he one of his things that he said I really liked was, thoughts become proteins, right?
Mhm.
And I love that because it's the perfect marriage of kind of the spiritual with the
Yeah.
physiological. Yeah, thoughts become proteins.
Yeah.
What we choose, and that's where like again with kind of the functional psychology incorporated into functional medicine, of we have power. That's kind of the divine power of humans, is the power of choice, and we can choose our thought patterns. And so that's where, with the emerging evidence and research with understanding the brain and neuroplasticity, we're starting to really see, well, it's really no different than like, oh, if I want big biceps, I need to give a stimuli that then my body will adapt to, of like, oh, we need bigger, stronger biceps to keep up with the environmental demand and keep up with that stimuli. And
Mhm.
it's what we're starting to see is like, well, it's really no different with how we program and wire our brain through neuroplasticity. So that's where, we're kind of in this crisis of, I think everybody's sort of drowning in their own ego. And there's so many ego seductive aspects of our society and culture these days. And so that's where, we kind of need this awakening of like, okay, awakening of self. And wow, I've just been staring through fog and smoke, and I can't even see myself clearly. And if you can't see yourself clearly,
Mhm.
how are you ever going to be able to see the path to healing?
Mhm. Totally. Yeah, I see that a lot. The way that I saw when I was writing the book was to create, like, calm that inflammatory storm. And it's hard, like you said, like seeing through the fog. I think that's a great analogy of, it's hard to really see the center of yourself when there's a storm going on, a
Hmm.
storm of inflammation. And when you start to calm that even just a little bit, it doesn't even need to be entirely resolved for you to start getting clarity as to what's up and what's down. Because I'm a major advocate of intuitive eating, but it's hard to know what intuition is when your hormones are all out of whack and your
Right.
inflammation level is up. Is it intuition or is it hangriness?
Yeah.
Is it intuition or is it hormonal imbalance? You have to create some semblance of normalcy as far as physiological functions to have intuition, to know what's right for your body.
Totally.
So that's the goal, is to get to the place of intuitive eating. But I don't think the people coming in feeling the way that most people are feeling are even at the place to even be fully in tune with their intuition.
Yeah. No, I think you're so right, which, like, that in a nutshell is really what got me more and more into this space. Was like, me growing up, I was just a little workhorse, and I could psychoanalyze why that is, but it was just one of these, like, I will outwork everyone. And ultimately, though, it's like you get to that point of like, oh, work smarter, not harder. And so, as you're saying, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, we want to eventually graduate to the point of enlightenment and being able to intuitively eat and intuitively live, and use our intuition to guide that. But yeah, when you're lost in the fog,
Mhm.
of your own ego, of your chronic inflammation, of all the disease and metabolic dysfunction, you have no sense of intuition. That compass is just spinning and spinning and spinning.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what I love about what you're doing, is you are creating a definitive roadmap, of
Mhm.
like, okay, let's get this under control so that we do get your systems back online. And then that compass can actually, like, okay, that's the direction we need to go.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I have observed it over time. Is it is like, you first have to stop the spinning, and then you've got to distinguish, okay, that way is forward, that way is backwards. So I'm going to go in that direction. And it's this very wide path. But then over time with continuous practice, you start, narrowing that path until eventually you're walking a pretty definitive fine path. And those are the people that, okay, they've done a lot of self-healing, either on their own or with a practitioner, and they're the ones that like, hey, Dr. Will, I reintroduced that one food, or I made this change to my sleep routine, and within a week I noticed and they feel as soon as they take one step off of that path.
Yeah, it's so good. And that's the realization, that's that transition of from protocol to lifestyle, from
Yeah.
protocol to just second nature intuitive eating. And it's a no-brainer at that point, because at that point, the person feels good or great, depending on the person, and they would rather feel that freaking awesome than they miss that food. And they tried it out and they know, hey, this is not worth it for me, or it is worth it. And they can make that decision for themselves. So that's a cool place to be at, because that's the rhythm of awareness. That's the rhythm of knowing their biochemistry in a way that most people are completely out of touch with. And it's understandable why they're out of touch, because there's so much going on, so much noise, both on a biochemistry level and external level as well.
Absolutely. We have to cut through the noise, kind of dampen down. And you're right. Something I was talking to my business partner about the other day, and you mentioned it earlier, and I meant to follow up on it, was, the paralysis by analysis because of information overload.
Mm-hmm.
And, the more I've thought about, and I don't want to go into too long of a tangent, but it's just ultimately comes down to, none of us have any uh, training to be prepared for the overwhelming amount of external stimuli that we get when we're born into this world. And something that I think is, I mean, we could talk all day about, oh, the environment's more toxic than ever, our lifestyle is more disease promoting than ever. That's very well documented. But something that we're all kind of catching on to, but we have yet to really do anything to change the trajectory of, is what are these things doing to us? Like throughout the history, the existence of our species, we have never had such a powerful stimuli as this, because we have access to every piece of information our species has ever produced 24/7, 365 with this. How
Mm-hmm.
on earth are we supposed to navigate reality with this thing that's pulling our attention in infinite
Mm-hmm.
directions?
Yeah.
And this is very much a generational. When I was 15, I got my first cell phone. It was T9 texting, 123H, 123E. And eventually I type out hello. Whereas now, like all this shit. So it's
Yeah.
nuts.
I know, right? We are one big social experiment
Yeah.
and health experiment on the long-term ramifications of this in a very short period of time. We're talking about just a couple of years at this point. It widely changed how we do society and the way that we live, and we see all the benefits. I mean, people are connecting to us right now because of this amazing technology, but
Right.
it is a double-edged sword.
Yes.
We need to find a healthier way to talk about healthier relationships. Like, it's the way we're relating to other people and the way that we're relating with our body with this technology of smartphones and all the technology. There's no way around it. I see it now, but we don't even understand the full breadth of what this is going to be doing to us on so many levels, from a relationship standpoint, like with other people, and with our health, and the impact that's having on our brains, and the impact that's having with our stress levels. And you look at this concept that's, like, when we say FOMO, we say, well, it's just this funny thing, fear of missing out. But really, like, what is it doing to stress and anxiety? You look at levels of depression and suicide with
Mm-hmm.
teens and social media. I mean, this is impacting our biochemistry
Mm-hmm.
in a major way. So we need to really, I agree. Like, I don't have all the answers, but it's something that I talk throughout the inflammation spectrum, because it's something that is impacting our physiology. It's something that I'm seeing now, and we need to start finding ways. Like, we talk about social media, like cleanses or detoxes, like taking time off of it, or putting it in a basket whenever you are home, or putting it on airplane modes, you don't get notifications. Like, these are some things that people can start doing, but I think we need to even go beyond that in some ways for some people, to really find the balance, because I think we all can handle a different threshold for these certain stimuli, but some people can't handle it even that much. They can't handle it.
Yeah, it's the bioindividuality again, and something I've been reflecting a lot about is, with the mental health and the suicide rates being on all-time high, or antidepressants being thrown out like Halloween candy, and all of this. Loneliness is kind of at an all-time high, and we see in the scientific literature, like, loneliness very much drives mortality. I mean, it is a huge contributor to death and disease. The sensation of being lonely and being in that dark place.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas achieving self-actualization through the cultivation of purpose. Purpose is something we need biologically, because as you were talking there, it made me think of like that book, the blue zones, and kind of the blue zone theory of like, all right, these places in the world where there's more centarians than anywhere else and people are living over 100, what is it that they're doing with their life that allows them to thrive? And there's those pillars, but part of it is it's being connected to society. It's being connected to our tribe. We are a social tribal species, and we have to find our purpose. Which, the more and more I look into it, it's like we're all just a bunch of bacteria. I feel like we're about to release our podcast with Quran, and talking about microbiome and stuff. And it really is. It's like, are humans that different than bacteria? Because we kind of get this purpose, which we look at as this flowery sense of fulfillment. But I think, in a way, it's almost kind of like a human fallacy, and really it's biological purpose. Like, we are here to serve the greater good of our species. And so to me, it's like biological congruence when we align our innermost truths with our outward actions that drive us towards a higher purpose that is beyond the self. So I don't know, it's just interesting though. And so my point being, to see how all of this impacts the product of inflammation that drives disease. So as you're saying, we have to zoom out more and more, to really kind of fix this crisis.
Yeah, totally. I think that we have to definitely look at the way that we're living life. And I think the level of mismatch, the level of the disparity between how we're living and are we in alignment with the planet? Are we in alignment with our biochemistry and genetics, which is our 99% of our genetics haven't changed in 10,000 years, but yet look at how we're living life. And then we wonder why these genetic predispositions are being triggered and awoken like never before, but yet those genetic predispositions have been there for a long time. So it is something that we need to look at on all fronts, from a food supply standpoint, from a technology standpoint, from a stress and sleep standpoint. We need to get in alignment with the rhythms of our biochemistry and the planet. And I see so many similarities between it on you talked about, like, bacteria and us. And I totally see that. It's like these microcosms and macrocosms on all fronts. And like, we see ourselves separate of the earth, but we're really not. We are just part of it. And the bacteria is a microcosm of that, is that what we see from a climate change standpoint, planetary standpoint, and on an individual, the climate change that's going on in the human body with the state of inflammation, it's really the same thing. We need to just start realizing that connectiveness to the planet and to everything in our life. And I think it's that ego, as you said, or that separation from each other and the planet, that really is going to be our demise if we don't do something different.
You said that so perfectly, and it really is, because if we apply that inflammation spectrum to the whole planet, I mean, it's all the same quote unquote root cause, or the way that we're, and I hate saying it, and I think people probably think I'm an asshole for it, but it's just like, our species is parasitic to the planet. I mean, if you look at it from a cold, objective, biological perspective, we are a parasitic species on this planet, but we are choosing to remain that, and so obviously there is a movement growing more and more, and But yeah, the trajectory is awful. I genuinely worry about like the world that my grandchildren or great grandchildren might be born into with the current trajectory of what's happening
Mhm.
with the environment, and then subsequently kind of the chronic disease epidemic. And so we are driving inflammation of the planet. We are driving inflammation of our bodies. And it's because we are so out of alignment with the natural way, the natural order. So, we're not going to like abandon our technology. That's not going to happen. But I guess my hope that I will not live to see the day, my hope is our species eventually finds a way where we live in harmony with nature, with technology. And right
Mhm.
here, right now, in today's time, we are not doing a good job at that at
Yeah.
all. We are very much living against nature, and it's taking the toll. So
Yeah.
we so your next book should be the existential inflammation
Inflammation
spectrum.
spectrum. I like that.
I think we
That's
have
good.
material here for your next
Yeah.
book.
People like, why is a functional medicine practitioner talking about this? It's hard not to. When you see that someone's health and your mind starts expanding to the links that's going on here, it is so much more than a high C-reactive protein. It's so much more than that.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, to your point, like of the malignancy or parasitic of the planet, I mean, you think about it, if you go on like a global level, if you look at like a telescope's view of the planet, and if you looked at the huge cities with all the smog coming out of it, and if you saw that on a human body, you're like, that's a tumor.
Yeah.
That is a malignancy that needs to be healed.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's how we're doing. We're literally just infesting the world with this consumption.
Hmm.
And it's just like cancer is consuming. That's how we're treating the earth.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's where the immune system of the planet, that is Mother Nature, is, doing what it's
Yeah.
doing. And I was talking to somebody about this a while back, and it is kind of one of those, unfortunately, we talk about kind of killing the planet so much. The reality though is the planet will survive longer than us. The
Yeah.
rock that is the planet, its kind of own organism on a universal level, it will outlive us. I mean, it might change, we might kill all the rainforest and all the animals and whatever, but the planet itself is going to continue and survive. The question
Yeah.
is, are we going to
Yeah.
survive
Right.
on this planet?
Yeah,
You
that's the
know?
question. Because
Yeah,
I mean, just like when you have horrible like volcanoes or forest or some acts of nature that will happen, life comes out from it. So
totally.
yeah, if we're part of that destruction, there's I don't have any doubt that the earth will regenerate.
Yep,
But will we be here for it or not?
exactly. Well, I feel like that's kind of the ultimate, like, wow, we went from nutrition driving inflammation to existential inflammation, but man, what an amazing conversation this has been. I cannot wait to read your book, and I'm looking forward to our paths cross in person, so we can have like a bro lunch and just
Yes.
vibe out further. So,
Yeah.
are you going to be traveling much the rest of the year?
This year, what do I have? Well, the book launch. So I'll be in New York, LA, Miami. We'll be in different places for the inflammation spectrum launch, speaking at different events. I co-host a podcast called Goop Fellas with Goop, which is Gwyneth Paltrow's wellness brand. So Seamus Mullen and I host Goop Fellas. So I'll be traveling for a few different interviews for that show. And nothing until next year, other than that stuff, which will be a lot. But next year I'll be at IHS, and
Cool.
yeah, some cool stuff coming up.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely know I'll be at IHS, so hopefully I run into you sooner.
Yeah.
But if not, I'll be sure to pester you at IHS, and we can grab some lunch, hang out a little bit.
Yeah.
But definitely, I'll be telling everybody to check out your book, because I think what a powerful tool, and it is exactly teaching people how not to need, medicine in a way, and how to take ownership of their health. So I'm really proud and impressed by the work you're doing, and very honored that you joined me on this podcast today.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm sure we'll talk soon, my friend.
Yeah. Talk soon.
All right. See ya.